Marcus Chen had seen many strange things during his 20-year career as a deep space salvage operator, but nothing quite like this. The distress beacon had led him to a drifting escape pod near the outer rim of the Kepler system, its hull scarred by what looked like weapon fire. Inside, curled up in a makeshift nest of torn fabric, was a child. She couldn't have been more than 4 years old, with pale blue skin that shimmered slightly in the pod's emergency lighting. Her large violet eyes stared up at him with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. Strange, delicate markings covered her arms like intricate tattoos, and her hair was white as starlight. She was clearly not human, but the way she reached out to him with small, trembling hands made his heart ache. Marcus had been alone in space for 3 months, working the salvage routes that most crews avoided. The isolation was getting to him, and seeing this frightened child made him realize just how much he missed having someone to care for. He'd lost his own family years ago in a transport accident, and the emptiness had driven him to the far reaches of space where he could work alone with his grief. The child spoke in a musical language he didn't recognize, but her tone was unmistakably that of someone asking for help. Marcus activated his suit's translation protocols, but the system couldn't identify her species or language. What it could tell him was that she was malnourished, dehydrated, and had been alone in the pod for at least a week. Without hesitation, Marcus gathered the child in his arms and brought her aboard his ship, the Iron Will. She clung to him with surprising strength, her small fingers gripping his jacket as if he were her lifeline. As he carried her to his quarters, he noticed something else unusual about her. She was warm, much warmer than a human child would be, and her skin seemed to pulse gently with an inner light. Over the next few days, Marcus worked tirelessly to care for her. He synthesized foods that his ship's medical scanner indicated would be safe for her physiology, carefully monitoring her vital signs as she slowly recovered. She was remarkably resilient, adapting quickly to human food and the ship's environment. More importantly, she began to trust him. Communication was initially challenging, but Marcus was patient. He taught her basic English words while she gradually shared pieces of her own language. Her name, as far as he could understand, was something like Lyra, though she seemed delighted when he shortened it to Lyra. She was quick to learn, picking up new words and concepts with startling intelligence. The more time Marcus spent with Lyra, the more he realized she was special beyond just being an alien child. She had an intuitive understanding of the ship's systems that amazed him. Within days, she could predict when certain components needed maintenance before his diagnostic systems flagged them. She seemed to sense electromagnetic fields and energy patterns in ways that defied explanation, but it was her capacity for affection that truly won him over. Despite whatever trauma she had endured, Lyra laughed easily and often. She would sit with him in the pilot's chair, pointing excitedly at stars and nebulae, asking endless questions about everything she saw. Her curiosity was infectious, reminding Marcus why he had fallen in love with space exploration in the first place. As weeks passed, Marcus faced a difficult decision. He'd tried to locate Lyra's people, sending out messages on various frequencies and checking with every contact he had in the sector. The responses were always the same. No one recognized her species or had any record of missing persons matching her description. It was as if she had appeared from nowhere. Meanwhile, Lyra was thriving under his care. She had gained weight. Her skin now glowed with healthy radiance, and she followed Marcus everywhere with the devotion of a daughter for her father. She had started calling him Papa Marcus in her musical accent, a title that both warmed his heart and terrified him with its implications. The turning point came when Marcus received a message from his supervisor at Stellar Salvage Corporation. His leave was up and he needed to return to the central hub for reassignment. Marcus realized he couldn't abandon Lyra to the bureaucratic maze of alien services. The thought of her ending up in some research facility or foster system filled him with protective rage. That night, as Lyra slept curled against his side during their regular story time, Marcus made his choice. He would resign from the corporation, liquidate his assets, and find a quiet world where he could raise her properly. She deserved a childhood, not a life as a specimen or ward of the state. The next morning, Marcus began making arrangements. He knew a small agricultural colony called New Haven that welcomed settlers and asked few questions about their backgrounds. It was remote enough to avoid unwanted attention, but civilized enough to provide Lyra with education and social interaction with other children. As he plotted their course, Marcus watched Lyra playing with a holographic puzzle he'd created for her. She solved it in minutes, then began modifying the program itself, adding new elements with an artistic flair that left him speechless. Whatever her origins, she was brilliant, creative, and already thinking of this ship as home. Marcus sealed his resignation letter and set course for New Haven. He had no idea what challenges lay ahead, but for the first time since losing his family, he felt genuinely hopeful about the future. Lyra had brought light back into his life, and he would move mountains to protect that light. Little did he know that somewhere in the depths of space, others were searching for the very child he now considered his daughter, and their arrival would test everything he believed about love, sacrifice, and what it truly meant to be a parent. New Haven proved to be exactly what Marcus had hoped for when he and Lyra arrived 3 years ago. The agricultural colony was small enough that everyone knew each other, but diverse enough that one more unusual family barely raised eyebrows. The settlers were mostly refugees, pioneers, and misfits who had come seeking fresh starts, and they understood the value of not asking too many questions about someone's past. Marcus had used his salvage earnings to purchase a modest farm on the colony's eastern continent. The rolling hills reminded him of Earth's countryside, and the twin suns provided the warm, bright environment that Lyra seemed to thrive in. He'd built their home himself, incorporating design elements that accommodated Lyra's unique needs: wider windows to let in more light, higher ceilings to account for her rapid growth, and a special room where she could safely practice her developing abilities. At 7 years old, Lyra was a remarkable child by any measure. She stood almost as tall as human children 2 years older. Her blue skin had deepened to a rich azure, and the delicate markings on her arms had grown more intricate as she matured. Her violet eyes sparkled with intelligence and mischief, and her laughter had become the favorite sound in Marcus's world. The local school had been initially hesitant to accept an alien student, but Principal Davies was a practical woman who believed every child deserved education. Lyra's eagerness to learn and her gentle nature quickly won over both teachers and students. She excelled in mathematics and science, often helping classmates with problems that challenged them. Her artistic abilities were extraordinary. She could create holographic sculptures that seemed to capture the very essence of living things. However, it was Lyra's empathic abilities that truly set her apart. She could sense the emotional states of others with startling accuracy, often knowing when someone was upset before they showed any outward signs. Marcus had first noticed this trait when she was 5, and their neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, had come to visit. Lyra had immediately run to the older woman and hugged her, somehow knowing that Mrs. Patterson had just received news of her son's death in a mining accident. Word of Lyra's gifts spread quietly through the community, but rather than fear or suspicion, it brought a steady stream of people seeking her unique form of comfort. Farmers would visit when their crops were failing, and Lyra would somehow sense what the plants needed. Parents brought sick children, and while Lyra couldn't heal them, her presence seemed to ease their suffering and help them recover faster. Marcus watched these interactions with a mixture of pride and worry. He was amazed by his daughter's compassion and wisdom, but he also remembered the fear in her eyes when he'd first found her. Someone or something had hurt her badly, and he lived with the constant anxiety that her past might catch up with them. The breakthrough in understanding Lyra's origins came unexpectedly during a routine school science project. The assignment was to grow crystals using various chemical solutions, but Lyra's crystals grew differently than everyone else's. They formed complex geometric patterns that seemed to pulse with inner light, and they resonated with musical tones when touched. Mrs. Richardson, the science teacher, was so intrigued that she sent samples to a university friend for analysis. The results were astounding. The crystals contained trace elements that didn't exist naturally in this star system, and their molecular structure suggested they were artificially created using technology far beyond current human capabilities. More disturbing was the discovery that the crystal's resonance frequency matched theoretical calculations for interdimensional communication devices. Marcus confronted Lyra about the crystals that evening, sitting with her on their porch as the twin suns set behind the hills. She looked up at him with those wise violet eyes and spoke with a maturity that always surprised him. "I don't remember much from before you found me, Papa Marcus," she said softly. But sometimes I dream about a place with crystal cities that sing in the wind. There were others like me, but they were angry about something. Scared. I think they were fighting." She paused, reaching out to touch his hand with her warm fingers. "In my dreams, the singing crystals were how we talked to each other across long distances. Like when you use the communication array to talk to other colonies." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. If Lyra's people possessed interdimensional communication technology, they were far more advanced than anything in known space. The implications were staggering and potentially dangerous. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Dr. Sarah Kim from the University of New Geneva had made the journey to New Haven personally, ostensibly to study Lyra's crystals, but clearly more interested in Lyra herself. She was a xenobiologist with impressive credentials and a warm demeanor that immediately put Lyra at ease. "I've never seen anything like this," Dr. Kim explained, showing Marcus detailed analyses of the crystal samples. "The technology required to create these structures is centuries beyond our current capabilities. But what's really fascinating is that they seem to be grown rather than manufactured. It's as if your daughter's physiology naturally produces them." Dr. Kim spent a week studying Lyra with Marcus's careful supervision. Her tests revealed that Lyra's nervous system operated on quantum frequencies, allowing her to perceive electromagnetic fields and possibly other dimensional layers that humans couldn't detect. Her empathic abilities were likely a side effect of this quantum sensitivity, enabling her to literally sense the bioelectric patterns of emotions in other living beings. "She's not just an alien child," Dr. Kim concluded in her final report. "She's a member of a species that has evolved beyond our current understanding of biology and physics. Her people must be incredibly advanced." As Dr. Kim prepared to leave, she pulled Marcus aside for a private conversation. "I have to ask, have you considered what you'll do if her people come looking for her?" Marcus had considered it every day for 3 years, but hearing it spoken aloud made his stomach clench with anxiety. "She's my daughter now," he said firmly. "I won't let anyone take her away from the life we've built together." Dr. Kim nodded sympathetically. "I understand your feelings and I've seen how much she loves you. But from a legal standpoint, if her biological family comes forward with proof of relationship, you might not have much choice in the matter." That night, Marcus stood in Lyra's doorway watching her sleep. Her skin glowing softly in the darkness like a gentle nightlight. She had given him purpose, joy, and a love deeper than anything he'd ever experienced. The thought of losing her was unbearable, but he knew Dr. Kim was right. If Lyra's people were as advanced as the evidence suggested, they would eventually find her. He made a quiet promise to his sleeping daughter and to himself. Whatever came, whoever tried to take her away, he would fight for her with everything he had. She was more than just the alien child he'd rescued. She was his heart, his future, and his reason for living. And he would not give her up without the fight of his life. 5 years had passed since Dr. Kim's visit, and Lyra was now 12 years old. Though her accelerated development made her appear closer to 15, she had grown into a striking young woman with an ethereal beauty that turned heads wherever she went. Her azure skin now held deeper undertones of silver that shifted in different lights, and her white hair had grown long and lustrous, often seeming to move with its own subtle breeze. Marcus watched with parental pride as his daughter delivered her graduation speech to the New Haven Academy's class of 2387. At 12, she was the youngest student ever to complete the advanced curriculum, but her academic achievements were only part of what made her special. Standing at the podium with confidence beyond her years, Lyra spoke about humanity's capacity for kindness and acceptance, using her own experience as an example. "When my father found me," she said, her musical voice carrying clearly across the assembly hall, "I was alone, afraid, and different from everyone around me. But the people of New Haven didn't see an alien child to be feared or studied. They saw someone who needed a home, and they gave me one. They taught me that family isn't about sharing the same DNA or coming from the same world. It's about choosing to love someone unconditionally." Marcus felt tears sting his eyes as he watched the audience respond to his daughter's words. She had learned to speak multiple human languages fluently, but more importantly, she had learned to speak the language of compassion that transcended species barriers. After the ceremony, as families celebrated around them, Lyra pulled Marcus aside with an expression he'd learned to recognize. She had sensed something unusual. "Papa, there are people here who feel different," she whispered. "Not bad different, just not from here." They're trying to hide it, but their emotional patterns are strange. Marcus's protective instincts immediately sharpened. Over the years, he'd occasionally noticed individuals who seemed to take unusual interest in Lyra, though they always disappeared before he could investigate. He'd assumed they were researchers or government agents keeping tabs on the colony's unusual resident. But Lyra's warning suggested something more significant. Following her subtle gestures, Marcus spotted them. 3 individuals scattered throughout the crowd who looked human but carried themselves with an otherworldly grace. They were dressed in perfectly normal clothes, but something about their movements seemed too fluid, too precise. When one of them turned slightly, Marcus caught a glimpse of faint markings along her neck that reminded him of Lyra's patterns. "Stay close to me," he murmured to Lyra, then louder. "Let's head home. We can celebrate there." As they made their way through the crowd, Marcus noticed the strangers moving to intercept them. His hand instinctively went to the sidearm he still carried from his salvage days, but Lyra caught his wrist. "Wait," she said softly. "They're not hostile. They're curious and sad." Before Marcus could respond, the nearest stranger approached them. Up close, she was clearly not human despite her disguise. Her skin had the same subtle luminescence as Lyra's, though it was disguised with makeup, and her eyes held depths that seemed to contain starlight. "Excuse me," she said in accented English. "Might I speak with you for a moment? My name is Vera, and I believe your daughter and I have much in common." Marcus positioned himself protectively between Vera and Lyra, but his daughter stepped forward with surprising boldness. "You're like me," Lyra said, her voice filled with wonder rather than fear. "I can feel it. You're from the Crystal Cities." Vera's composed expression cracked slightly, revealing surprise and something that might have been hope. "You remember the Crystal Cities?" "Sometimes in dreams," Lyra replied. "But they're distant dreams. This is my home now, and he's my father." The woman's gaze shifted to Marcus, and he saw her evaluate him with alien intelligence. "Marcus Chen, salvage operator turned farmer. You've done well by her. She's grown strong and wise under your care." "How do you know my name?" Marcus demanded, his hand moving closer to his weapon. "We've been watching, waiting for the right time to approach," Vera admitted. "Lyra is important to our people, more important than you can imagine. But we also see that she's happy here, which complicates matters considerably." "Her name is Lyra, and she's my daughter," Marcus said firmly. "I don't care who you are or where you're from." Vera studied him for a long moment, then nodded with what seemed like approval. "Your protective instincts are admirable. They're part of why we've waited so long to make contact." She turned back to Lyra, her expression softening. "Child, do you know what you are? Do you understand your nature?" Lyra considered the question seriously. "I know I'm different. I can sense emotions, grow crystals that sing, and sometimes I see patterns in energy that others can't. Papa Marcus says I'm special, but he's never made me feel like I was a freak or an experiment." "You're not a freak," Vera said gently. "You're a resonance guide, one of the rarest and most gifted of our kind. Your abilities to sense quantum harmonics and emotional patterns make you invaluable to our society." Marcus felt his blood run cold. "Invaluable how?" Vera hesitated, clearly choosing her words carefully. "Our people are at war, Mr. Chen. We've been fighting an enemy that exists partially outside normal space-time, making them nearly impossible to track or predict. Resonance guides like Lirelai can perceive their true positions and movements. She could help end a conflict that has raged for decades. She's a child." Marcus exploded, his worst fears confirmed. "You want to use her as some kind of weapon?" "Not a weapon," Vera said quickly. "A guide. Her abilities could save millions of lives." Lyra stepped between them, her young face set with determination that reminded Marcus that despite her age, she possessed wisdom beyond her years. "I need to know more," she said calmly. "About my people, about this war, about what it means to be a resonance guide. But I also need you to understand something." She looked directly at Vera. "Marcus Chen is my father in every way that matters. Any decision about my future includes him." Vera looked surprised by Lyra's assertiveness, but Marcus felt his heart swell with pride. His daughter was handling this impossible situation with grace and strength that amazed him. "We're prepared to offer you both passage to our homeworld," Vera said after a moment. "You could see the Crystal Cities, learn about your heritage, understand your true potential." "And if we refuse?" Marcus asked. Vera's expression grew troubled. Then we'll respect your choice and withdraw. But the war continues and more of our people die every day. Eventually, desperate times may force desperate measures. The threat was subtle but clear. Marcus realized they were standing at a crossroads that would determine not just their future, but potentially the fate of two civilizations. Lyra reached for his hand, her warm fingers intertwining with his. Papa, I think we need to hear them out. Not because we have to, but because it's the right thing to do. Looking down at his extraordinary daughter, Marcus saw the same brave child who had reached out to him in that escape pod years ago. She was asking him to trust her judgment, to take another leap of faith together. 3 days, he said to Vera. We'll listen to what you have to say, but then we decide together what happens next. Vera bowed her head respectfully. 3 days. Thank you, Marcus Chen. Your daughter is fortunate to have found a father with such wisdom and courage. As the aliens melted back into the crowd, Marcus held Lyra close and wondered what forces they had just set in motion. The quiet life they'd built on New Haven was about to change forever, and he could only hope that the love they shared would be strong enough to survive whatever came next. The meeting took place in the neutral territory of New Haven's community center, with Mayor Harrison acting as mediator. Marcus had insisted on witnesses and legal representation, knowing that whatever happened in the next few hours could change everything. Lyra sat beside him, calm but alert, her hand resting on his arm in a gesture of mutual support. Vera had returned with 2 companions, but it was the 4th figure who entered the room that made Lyra gasp audibly. The woman was tall and elegant, with the same distinctive azure skin and silver markings. But where Lyra's patterns were delicate and flowing, this woman's were bold and angular, suggesting strength and authority. Her violet eyes were striking in their intensity, and when she looked at Lyra, the naked emotion on her face was unmistakable. My daughter, she whispered in the musical language Marcus had heard Lyra speak in her sleep. Lyra stiffened beside him, her empathic abilities clearly overwhelmed by the newcomer's emotional state. I can feel her pain, she murmured to Marcus. So much grief and loss, but also hope, desperate hope. The woman approached slowly, her movements carefully controlled as if she were afraid of frightening Lyra away. When she spoke again, it was in accented but clear English. My name is Thyroli of the 7th Resonance. I was your birth mother, Lirelei. I have searched for you across star systems for 8 years. Marcus felt his world tilting. Despite all his preparations, hearing those words spoken aloud hit him like a physical blow. This was Lyra's biological mother, and the love radiating from her was impossible to deny. 8 years? Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. But I've only been with Papa Marcus for 5 years. Where was I for 3 years before that? Thyroli's expression crumpled with pain. Lost. Hidden. I thought you were dead. She looked at Marcus with an expression that mixed gratitude with desperate need. This man saved you when I could not. For that, I am forever in his debt. She pulled out a small crystal device that projected a holographic image into the air between them. It showed a younger version of Lyra standing beside Thyroli in what looked like a crystal garden. The resemblance was undeniable. They had the same delicate features, the same graceful movements, the same inner light. You were taken during a raid on our outer colony, Thyroli continued, her voice thick with emotion. The enemy forces attacked without warning. I tried to reach you, but the quantum disruptors made it impossible to track anyone. By the time the battle ended, you and 17 other children had vanished. Marcus watched Lyra process this information, saw her struggling with memories that were beginning to surface. I remember running, she said slowly, and bright lights that hurt my eyes. Someone was carrying me, but it wasn't you. My sister, Niralai. She was trying to get you to the escape pods when... Thyroli's voice broke. We found her body 3 days later. She had died protecting you, but you were gone. The room fell silent except for the soft humming of the air recyclers. Marcus felt the weight of Thyroli's grief and understood, perhaps for the first time, the depth of loss this woman had endured. But understanding didn't make what came next any easier. I've come to take you home, Thyroli said simply. To teach you about your heritage, your abilities, your responsibility to our people. You're needed, Lirelei. The war goes badly, and without resonance guides we may not survive another year. Lyra looked between her birth mother and Marcus, conflict clear in her violet eyes. This is my home, she said firmly. These are my people. Marcus is my father. He has been a good guardian, Thyrola acknowledged, but he is not your family. I am your mother and our people are your true family. You belong with us. Marcus felt anger surge through him at the dismissive tone. Family isn't just about genetics, he said, standing to face Thyrola. Family is about love, sacrifice, being there through good times and bad. I've been Lyra's father for 5 years. I've held her through nightmares, celebrated her achievements, worried about her future. Where were you?
Fighting a war to protect our people.
Thyrola snapped back, her composure finally cracking. Do you think I wanted to be separated from my daughter? Do you think a day has passed when I haven't thought about her, searched for her, mourned her? The raw emotion in her voice made Marcus pause. He could see the truth in her eyes. This woman had suffered just as much as he feared he would if Lyra were taken from him. I don't doubt your love for her, Marcus said more quietly. But love isn't enough to justify tearing a child away from the only stable home she's ever known. Lyra stood abruptly, her inner light flaring brighter than Marcus had ever seen it. Stop, she said, her voice carrying an authority that surprised everyone in the room. Stop fighting over me like I'm some kind of prize to be won. She turned to face Thyrola directly. You say you're my mother, and I can feel that you're telling the truth. I can sense the bond between us, faint but real. But do you know what I remember most clearly from before Papa Marcus found me? Thyrola shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Fear, Lyra said simply. Constant, overwhelming fear. Of the war, of the violence, of never being safe. Papa Marcus gave me something you couldn't, peace. He gave me a childhood where I could grow and learn and become who I want to be, not what others need me to be. She moved to stand between Marcus and Thyrola, looking at both of them with wisdom that seemed impossible for someone so young. I understand that your people are suffering, she continued, addressing Thyrola. I understand that I might be able to help them, but I won't be manipulated by guilt or obligation. If I choose to use my abilities to help in your war, it will be my choice made freely. Marcus felt a surge of pride so strong it nearly overwhelmed him. His daughter, for she was his daughter in every way that mattered, was showing the kind of moral courage that would have impressed hardened diplomats. Thyrola looked stunned by Lyra's words. You would consider helping us? I would consider learning more about the situation, Lyra corrected. About the war, the enemy, what being a resonance guide really means. But any decisions I make will include Papa Marcus. He's not just my guardian. He's my family, and I won't abandon him any more than you want me to abandon you. The alien woman stared at Marcus with new understanding. You raised her to be strong, she said softly. To think for herself, to choose her own path. I raised her to be herself, Marcus replied. Nothing more, nothing less. Thyrola nodded slowly, then made a decision that surprised everyone in the room. She knelt before Lyra, taking her daughter's hands in her own. Then teach me, she said simply. Teach me about the life you've built here, the people you love, the future you want. Help me understand why you consider this place home, and in return, let me share with you the heritage you've lost, the abilities you've barely begun to explore, the people who need you. Lyra looked at Marcus, and he saw his own hope reflected in her eyes. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward that didn't require choosing between two families. 1 month, Lyra said finally. Stay for 1 month. Learn about our life here and teach me about yours. Then we'll decide together what happens next. Thyrola bowed her head in acceptance. 1 month. As the formal meeting concluded and people began to file out, Marcus realized that the hardest part was just beginning. He had 1 month to prove that the life he'd built with Lyra was worth preserving, while competing with a mother's love and the call of an entire civilization. The stakes had never been higher, and the outcome had never been more uncertain. The month that followed was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. Thyrola took up residence in New Haven's small guest quarters, immersing herself in human society with the dedication of an anthropologist studying a fascinating new culture. She attended community meetings, helped with the harvest, and spent long hours talking with the people who had become Lyra's extended family. Marcus watched with growing unease as his daughter began to change, not in her personality or her love for him, but in her understanding of herself. Thyrola taught her meditation techniques that enhanced her natural abilities, showing her how to consciously control the quantum resonance patterns that had previously manifested randomly. Watch, Lyra said excitedly one evening, sitting cross-legged in their living room with a handful of raw crystal fragments. As Marcus observed, she closed her eyes and extended her hands. The crystals began to glow, then slowly reformed themselves into intricate geometric patterns that sang with harmonic frequencies. "Your grandmother was a master resonance sculptor," Thyrelai explained, sitting beside her daughter with obvious pride. She could create crystal matrices that preserved memories, emotions, even consciousness itself for centuries. Marcus felt a chill at the implications. "Consciousness preservation? You're talking about immortality." "Not immortality," Thyrelai corrected. "Legacy preservation. When our greatest minds faced death, they could transfer their knowledge and wisdom into crystal matrices for future generations to access. Lyra has that same potential, perhaps even greater." As the days passed, Marcus began to understand just how much of Lyra's heritage had been hidden from both of them. Her people, the Aetherli, were indeed an ancient and advanced civilization. They had developed technology that blurred the lines between science and what humans would call magic, all based on their natural ability to perceive and manipulate quantum frequencies. But with understanding came a growing sense of inadequacy. Marcus was a simple man who had given Lyra love and stability, but Thyrelai could offer her a connection to powers and knowledge beyond human comprehension. When he watched them practice together, speaking in their musical language and creating wonders with their combined abilities, he felt like an outsider looking in on something he could never be part of. The turning point came during the third week, when Thyrelai finally revealed the true scope of the war her people faced. She activated a holographic projector that filled their living room with images of devastation that made Marcus's blood run cold. "The Devourers," she explained, as the display showed writhing masses of darkness that seemed to consume light itself. "They exist partially outside normal spacetime, making them nearly impossible to track or fight with conventional weapons. They feed on quantum energy, the same energy that powers our technology and abilities." The images shifted to show Aetherli worlds under attack, crystal cities crumbling as the darkness spread. "They've consumed 7 of our colonies in the past year alone. Billions of lives lost, entire civilizations erased from existence." Lyra watched the destruction with tears streaming down her face. Marcus could see her empathic abilities overwhelmed by the recorded suffering, but she forced herself to keep watching. "How does being a resonance guide help fight them?" she asked quietly. "The Devourers exist in quantum superposition," Thyrelai explained. "They can be in multiple locations simultaneously until observed and measured. Normal sensors can't lock onto them because they're not fully in our reality, but resonance guides can perceive their true quantum signatures, can predict where they'll manifest next." She gestured, and the display showed battle scenarios where Aetherli forces, guided by individuals with Lyra's distinctive markings, managed to successfully engage and destroy the shadow creatures. "With proper guidance, our fleets can target the Devourers before they fully phase into our reality. It's the only effective defense we've found, but we've lost so many guides." Her voice broke. "Lyra, you're one of fewer than 50 resonance guides left alive. Without you and the others, our entire civilization will fall within a year." The weight of that revelation settled over the room like a physical presence. Marcus understood now why Thyrelai had searched so desperately for her daughter, why she was willing to respect Lyra's autonomy while still pleading for her help. This wasn't just about a mother wanting her child back. It was about the survival of an entire species. But it was Lyra's response that surprised him most. "Show me more," she said, her young voice steady despite her tears. "Show me everything. The battles, the failures, the successes. If I'm going to make a decision about this, I need to understand all of it." Over the following days, Thyrelai shared intelligence reports, tactical analyses, and first-hand accounts from survivors. Marcus watched his daughter absorb information that would have overwhelmed most adults, processing complex military strategies and quantum physics with the same ease she had once shown in solving holographic puzzles. More troubling was the change in how others looked at her. Word of her true nature had spread through New Haven, and while most of the colonists remained supportive, Marcus could see the shift in their attitudes. They still loved Lyra, but now they also feared her. She wasn't just their neighbor's unusual but gifted daughter anymore. She was a being of immense power with responsibilities that transcended their small world. The crisis came during the 4th week, when Marcus overheard a conversation between Dr. Kim, who had returned to study Lyra's developing abilities, and Mayor Harrison. The legal situation is complex, Harrison was saying. Thiralai has provided genetic proof of her relationship to Lyra, and the Interstellar Family Court recognizes biological parental rights. Marcus's adoption was never formally recognized by galactic authorities. But surely Lyra's wishes count for something, Dr. Kim protested. At her age, she's considered old enough to have input but not old enough to make final decisions. If this goes to court, the judge will have to weigh her desires against what's deemed to be in her best interests and the greater good. Marcus felt his world crumbling. Despite all his love and sacrifice, despite the life they'd built together, he might have no legal standing to keep his daughter. Worse, the greater good argument would be almost impossible to counter when billions of lives hung in the balance. That night, as they sat together on their porch watching the twin moons rise, Lyra leaned against him with a sigh that seemed far too heavy for someone so young. "You heard them talking, didn't you?" she asked quietly. Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. "I've been thinking about it for weeks now," she continued, "about duty and love and what it means to have power that others need. There are no easy answers, are there?" "No," Marcus managed to say. "There aren't." She was quiet for a long moment, then asked the question he'd been dreading. "Papa, if I decided to go with her, to learn to use my abilities to help save her people, would you understand?" Marcus closed his eyes, feeling tears threaten. "I'd understand," he said quietly. "I wouldn't like it and I'd miss you every day for the rest of my life, but I'd understand. And if I decided to stay here, to choose the life we've built over the responsibilities I was born with, I'd support that decision too," he said. "But Lyra, the choice has to be yours, not because it's legal or practical, but because it's right. You're old enough now to understand the consequences of your decisions, and mature enough to live with them." She turned to look at him, her violet eyes reflecting the moonlight. "I love you, Papa Marcus. Whatever happens, that will never change." As they sat together in comfortable silence, Marcus realized that the next week would determine not just their future, but the fate of two civilizations. The weight of that responsibility was staggering, but looking at his remarkable daughter, he knew she was strong enough to bear it. The question was whether their love for each other would be strong enough to survive whatever choice she made. The final week arrived with the weight of inevitability. Thiralai had received urgent communications from her people. 3 more colonies had fallen to the Devourers, and the Aetherli High Council was demanding Lyra's immediate return. The grace period was ending, and decisions could no longer be postponed. Marcus found himself walking the farm early one morning, trying to memorize every detail of the life he might be about to lose. The fields he'd planted, the house he'd built with his own hands, the barn where Lyra had learned to ride horses, all of it felt precious and fragile in the pre-dawn light. He found Lyra in her favorite spot, a small hill overlooking their property where she often went to think. She sat cross-legged in the grass, surrounded by floating crystal formations that pulsed with soft light. Her abilities had grown tremendously during Thiralai's visit, and the display of power before him was both beautiful and heartbreaking. "The legal documents arrived this morning," Marcus said quietly, settling beside her. "Thiralai has filed a formal petition with the Interstellar Family Court for full custody. The hearing is set for tomorrow." Lyra nodded without opening her eyes. "I know, I can feel her anxiety from here. She's trying to stay calm, but she's terrified that she'll lose me again. And how do you feel about that?" The crystals around them shifted color, reflecting her emotional state. Torn, guilty, responsible for everyone's happiness. She finally opened her eyes and looked at him. "Do you know what the hardest part is, Papa?" Marcus shook his head. "I can feel the suffering of her people across space. My empathic abilities have grown so much that sometimes I catch echoes of the Devourer attacks through the quantum field. People dying, families separated, entire worlds consumed by darkness, and I have the power to help them." She stood and began pacing, her agitation causing the floating crystals to orbit faster around her. "But I also know what it would cost. I've seen the training records, the psychological profiles of other resonance guides. To fight the Devourers effectively, I'd have to let that darkness into my mind, experience their hunger and hatred directly. The guides who survive combat are changed, harder. They lose the ability to feel joy the way normal people do." Marcus felt his heart breaking for her. "You're afraid of losing yourself." I'm afraid of losing everything that makes me who I am, she confirmed. The girl who laughs at your terrible jokes, who cries during sad movies, who still wants bedtime stories even though I'm almost 13. If I become a weapon against the Devourers, will I still be your daughter? Before Marcus could answer, they heard footsteps approaching. Thirlai climbed the hill, her expression grave. She carried a communication device that was chiming urgently. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said, but this concerns both of you. She activated the device, and a holographic figure appeared, an elderly Etherlai with intricate silver markings and eyes that held the weight of centuries. High Counselor Zenthali, Thirlai said, bowing her head respectfully. The hologram's gaze fixed on Lyra with intensity that made Marcus instinctively step closer to his daughter. Lyra of the 7th Resonance, I bring grave tidings. The Devourers have broken through our outer defenses. They will reach our homeworld within days. Without immediate assistance from a resonance guide, our civilization ends. Lyra straightened under the weight of his stare. High Counselor, with respect, threats and ultimatums will not influence my decision. The elderly alien looked surprised by her directness. This is not a threat, child. It is reality. 12 billion souls depend on your choice, and what of my choice? Marcus found himself saying, surprising everyone, including himself. What of my rights as her father? Zenthale's expression grew cold. You are human. You cannot comprehend the scope of what is at stake here. I comprehend that you're asking a child to sacrifice her childhood, her happiness, and possibly her sanity for your war. Marcus shot back. I comprehend that you see her as a tool rather than a person. Papa, Lyra said softly, placing a calming hand on his arm. But her eyes never left the High Counselor. You're wrong about my father, Counselor. He comprehends better than anyone what sacrifice means. He gave up everything to save one lost child. His career, his savings, his entire life. Not because he had to, but because it was right. She stepped forward, and Marcus could see strength radiating from her that reminded him of the woman she was becoming. You speak of 12 billion souls as if their suffering gives you the right to demand my service. But what you don't understand is that forced service given out of guilt or obligation, is weak. It breaks under pressure. The hologram flickered as Zenthali's control wavered. Then what would you have us do? Watch our people die? I would have you ask, Lyra said simply. Not demand, not threaten, not manipulate. Ask me to help and accept that I might say no. The silence stretched uncomfortably before Zenthali finally spoke. Very well. Lyra Lee of the 7th Resonance, I ask you to help us. Will you come to the aid of your people? Lyra looked at Marcus, and in her eyes he saw the decision she'd already made. His heart clenched, but he managed to nod his support. I will help, she said finally. But not as your conscripted weapon, as a volunteer with conditions. Name them, Zenthale said quickly. First, Marcus Chen comes with me. He is my father, and I will not be separated from him. Second, I retain the right to withdraw from combat if I choose. Third, you will treat both of us with the respect due to free beings making a choice to help, not subjects following orders. Zenthali looked ready to object, but Thirlai spoke up. The conditions are reasonable, High Counselor, and they come from someone who understands both worlds. Perhaps that perspective is exactly what we need. After a long moment, Zenthali nodded. Agreed, but child, understand the urgency. We have days, not weeks. The communication ended, leaving the three of them alone on the hill. Marcus felt as if the ground had shifted beneath his feet. Lyra, you don't have to do this. We could fight the custody order, find another way. No, Papa, she said firmly. This isn't about legal custody anymore. It's about doing what's right. But I meant what I said about you coming with me. I need you. Thyralai stepped forward hesitantly. Marcus Chen, I owe you more than I can ever repay. You saved my daughter's life and gave her the strength to make this choice freely. If you're willing, I would be honored to have you as part of our family. Marcus looked between the two most important people in his life, the daughter he'd raised and the mother who had given birth to her. What exactly are you saying? I'm saying that family isn't just about genetics as you taught me, Thirlai said softly. Lyra Lee has two parents now. She needs both of us. As the three of them stood together watching the sunrise over New Haven, Marcus realized that the ending he'd feared might actually be a new beginning. The war ahead would be terrible, and the challenges immense, but they would face them together. His daughter had made her choice not out of duty or fear, but out of love for her birth people and love for the father who had raised her. In doing so, she had shown the kind of courage that made Marcus prouder than any achievement could. The battle for Lyra's future was over. The battle for everyone's future was about to begin.